Get your tickets now for the 23rd annual edition of the OUTshine LGBTQ Plus Film Festival happening April 23rd to May 2nd. Don't miss our incredible grand opening drive-in event followed by 10 days of non-stop films from here and all around the world that you can watch at home. Watch trailers and get your tickets at OUTshineFilm.com now.
Hello, everyone. This is Victor Jimenez, your Executive Director for the OUTshine LGBTQ Plus Film Festival. Welcome to our 23rd annual Miami edition. We're very happy, and we're presented by Gilead and Miami-Dade County, and thank you very much to our presenting sponsors. Glad to have you here. Hope you enjoyed the film. We're going to have hopefully an incredible Q&A with the director for AIDS Diva, The Legend of Connie Norman. So without further ado, let me bring in the director, Dante Alencatre. Dante, welcome.
Hi, Victor. Welcome. Bienvenidos, everyone that watched the film. I'm in LA, so it's on the other coast. But I will send you your greetings from Los Angeles to you, all of you.
No, thank you very much. Before I get to my first question, I just want to kind of throw out there where my normal mindset is I tend to be a person that likes documentaries. I just like learning about things. And this was like, what I really liked about this documentary, so I'll start with a compliment, is that, with LGBTQ plus history, the basic history is, historically speaking, we've been erased. Through the Middle Ages, when the monks were writing all the information, in the translations, they purposely left us out of the history. So through time, we have to figure out who was part of our community in ancient times. But now, more recently, we in fact are able to curate our own history, which is why I'm always very appreciative of documentaries, because it informs our own education to ourselves and also to the greater community of the people that had impact. And so that's one of the great things about this film is that, I did not know who Connie Norman was, and now I do. And I am very thankful for that. And I want to just thank you for me personally. And I am sure the audience who watched it to educating us on someone who was definitely very important in the history of the LGBTQ plus community. And with that lead in, Dante, tell us, why did you want to tell this story and where did it come from? How did it come about?
Well, thank you, Victor, for your compliment. I take it in. And Connie Norman was known during the time, during the AIDS, HIV activism time. She was very well known, actually. And if you saw in the film, she really took media on. She wrote a column. She had her own cable TV show. She had her own radio show. And this is they were kind of first for a openly trans woman to be able to do all of this. And she was imposing and fierce and fearless. And I think the reason I wanted to make a film, a historical film, is because I've been involved documenting the trans Latina community in LA and also in Peru, my native, where I'm from. And, most of the young people that I met throughout my screenings, for the last 14 years, always think that, they don't know whose shoulders they stand on. And when a friend of Connie mentioned to me, why don't you make a film about Connie Norman? And I had vaguely heard about her, but I didn't know anything besides a photo that I have seen of her. And when I started digging into the ACT UP Facebook page. That's the picture actually I saw, but in pink. So I thought she was like African American, the picture you're showing right now. So I said, well, I've been doing trans Latina stories. Maybe I should move into people of color, trans stories. And then when I saw her in a clip, which is the Wally George one that you saw, the Jerry Springer like host, I said, who is that woman? And I want to make a film about her. I had no idea how much archival footage there was of her, but luckily one of her best friends, Peter Cashman, was a broadcaster and seemed to love to film Connie wherever she went. When she was arrested, when she was in Kauai, when she was at demos, when she was doing, all kinds of civil disobedience. So knowing that I had all these blessings, which is archival footage, is a blessing. And nowadays we take it for granted because it's so easy to film something. But back then, Peter showed me the camera he used, to film Connie was this huge camera. We're talking about, late 80s, 90s. And it was in bad condition. So I immediately in VHS, so I digitized all of it. And I think it's, the bottom line is that if we as queer storytellers do not tell our own stories or dig out our own history, no one else will. Especially during the AIDS pandemic, most families will come to an apartment and they would just destroy everything that was evidence of their queerness, of their gayness. Luckily, with Connie Norman, we had the opposite. People adore her. They kept everything that they had with her, lots of pictures, lots of photographs. So we were really blessed from day one about what material we had to work on. And it was very important for me to show not only her activist world, but show some of her personal and her downtimes as a person living with AIDS.
And then I'm glad you mentioned the Jerry Springer type show, because there were two things that caught my attention about how she did things. One was that she was very empathic. She was able to listen to the other side and see where they were coming from. But two, and especially on that show, she didn't back down. The comment was like, "Oh, why'd you have to break that one glass window?" And she's like, "Well, that's all it takes for everyone to listen." And then pointing out, you're getting on us for this, but the reality, you have all this history of killing all these people and all this and this and this. Where's the outrage for that? So is that also one of the things that drew you to her? Was also about fierceness, but on the first point was her ability to actually, put herself in the shoes of the other person and kind of and feel what, understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, she was a natural bridge builder. She came from the streets. I think she barely finished high school, but like one of her friends told me, she was like a sponge. She was always learning. She was not dismissing any kind of ideology, and she was able to be, the thing that I think that I love the most every time I watch the film is her compassion and her empathy for every side of the story. I have to disclose that, as you probably all know, those talk shows today and back then, they were kind of like, stage. So people, Wally George paid people to come and, and shout out, Connie Norman. And actually there were some Connie Norman participants that came with her because that was shot in the Orange County, which is south of LA. And they said, but they were like 100-1 basically. So you saw like maybe a rainbow flag, but it was mostly Wally George audience. And Wally and Connie were actually friends outside that studio, but when they were on and they were performing, the two sides, she didn't let him, even though he was the host, she didn't, and there were like hundreds of haters in there, because that's all you can call them, and pointing out like one window. And that argument, and I'm sure you have heard in the last 4 years, they have used that one particular incident, like they're using right now with the trans athletes, that some two trans athletes won in Connecticut, and the cisgender girl lost, and people keeps using that argument that the one incident happened, and it takes over the whole issue. And I think Connie Norman was very cognizant of what she was doing. I think just like her friend Michael says, why did you go? I mean, it's because she needed part of her activism was being representing and being present, and schooling everybody about what gender identity was. And she was not afraid of any backlash or anything. She had a message to deliver, and she would do it any way she could.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on the gender identity portion, because the thing that really caught my attention, and I'm a person that I never heard of Connie Norman until I actually watched this documentary, was, from my point of view, and I live in my Miami bubble here, and my friends and my family and all that, I tend to view like gender fluidity and all this is almost kind of like a more recent, current, for lack of a better term, millennial type thing that has come into my worldview as a more recent thing. And it really genuinely surprised me, the comments that she made, back, when they were recorded in the late 80s, early 90s. And it was really a big eye opener to me. It was like, it's always the power of what the story is and what people are promoting, and that's what you hear about. But it's always been there, and that was like one of those like eye-opening moments in this documentary for me. I was like, wow, it's not really a new thing. It has been around for a while, and the reality is it was probably around much longer than Connie. It was an interesting point that you bring out, and it caught my attention in the documentary watching it. I'm just kind of I'm a little bit curious. It kind of popped into my when I was watching the film, and it might have been something I just missed. It's been a while since I've watched the film. She was speaking about. Actually, I have like kind of 2 points with this. She was speaking about like where she was kind of over gays and lesbians in general, but then she moved to San Francisco, and her experience with the gay and lesbian community there really, refreshed her, reinvigorated her. She felt very welcome in the whole thing. I'm going to revisit that point, but I was kind of curious. Why did she then, why did she leave San Francisco and go to LA? Like, I might have missed that in the film, but like she was, from my point of view, she was in San Francisco, but then all of a sudden she's involved in ACT UP LA. Did she just choose to move to LA at some point, just because she felt that's where the struggle was going to be, or something else brought her to LA? I was kind of curious about that.
Okay, well, this is for all our friends who have watched the film, and you, Victor. That's not in the film actually, but I know the reason why. Of course, she had found her intentional family, her logical family, within the confines of the Trocadero transfer in San Francisco. As you can imagine, San Francisco before 81, before the AIDS hit, was like heaven for everybody. And she being, a transgender woman, she found that her welcoming, and she was able to be herself and be free and be who she wanted to be and live her life, partying. I mean, that was the disco era. She was doing drugs, and she was having fun with different lovers, and that's where she met actually Bruce Norman. I guess Bruce was there just also having a good time, and they bonded as friends. And when Connie hit a patch when maybe the drugs were getting in her way of her life, Bruce basically told her, if you come to LA, I'll marry you. You know, I know we're both queer. We don't like. We're not gonna be like, you know, heteronormative in any way. But Bruce was just starting his business, and Connie had just inherited some money from her family, and so that's what happened. You know, I mean, she left San Francisco, I guess, at a point where she needed to have some renewal, some healing, some, you know, let your hair down a little bit, become a little more holistic. And then, unfortunately, that's when she, you know, found out. I think they even found out almost the same year that Bruce was HIV positive, and Connie followed suit. And like they say, you know, she had a moment of, like everybody who's been through that, a moment of reflection, a moment of like, what I'm gonna do with the rest of my life. Back then, it was basically that, like John Duran says, a death sentence. So she went to the parade, she saw ACT UP, and she said, this is what I'm gonna do, knowing that Bruce will be taking care of the, you know, household needs. And, you know, that's how they made the team. You know, she was the activist and Bruce was the provider.
Out of curiosity, what was the business that Bruce started?
He was an interior decorated to the stars.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, that was like a thought that, oh, I wonder what he does. He's a provider. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, Bruce passed away actually a few years after Connie. Everybody thought, but what you see of Bruce, who was so thin, you know, kind of emaciated in the footage that we have in Kauai, but he outlived Connie, which people were very surprised about, you know. He stayed in that house until he passed away. Where they live in Altadena, yeah.
Yeah, I think the comment was well made that, you know, she made a choice whether to take time for herself or staying active, and quite frankly, you know, burn the candle from both ends, and she chose to stay active. So, you know, it was a point that I definitely noticed in the film. Going back to the comment about San Francisco and the gay and the lesbian community, that actually genuinely, I'm just kind of sharing this to my audience in general and to you also, it struck a chord for me. And then the reason why, I remember a conversation I had probably 2 years ago with another LGBT organization, and I made a comment. You know, like we have these great trans films and documentaries, and yet we really don't have an audience. And then the person I was speaking to said, you know, it's probably because trans community doesn't feel that's a safe space. And I was like, you know, what do you mean? I'm an LGBTQ plus film festival. Why wouldn't it feel like a safe space? And then it wasn't clear to me then. But interestingly enough, I then went to actually visit another LGBT film festival, and then I went to go screen a trans doc viewing. But then I kind of was sitting in the audience, and then I heard comments that the audience was making, and then I understood what the person was telling me about. I was like, you know, they were just like snide little snippy comments, and if I was a trans person, I would like, you know, I wouldn't feel comfortable in this space, and I understood what my friend had told me. And it was just, and it was made a point in this film, and I want to call out to it that, you know, yeah, we are all called the same umbrella, but, you know, we still have to be cognizant of each other and each other's feelings and where we're coming from. And that comment of hers at that time just really genuinely struck a chord with me, because, you know, like I know exactly what she's talking about, because it was brought to my attention, and, you know, we've been working, you know, hard to address that within our film festival too. And I kind of just sharing that with the audience and you. How did you kind of touched on it? You know, actually, kind of going back, I'm kind of curious. You know, based on your, you know, the footage that you looked at, the interviews that you did with Connie's contemporaries today. There was another comment that she had made, you know, in the documentary, where, you know, we can't let HIV/AIDS get to the point where it just becomes this chronic thing, where like homelessness and whatever, and people, it's no longer this thing. Out of, you know, curiosity, like, how do you think she would feel with with the circumstance today. We have the medications and people are treated, and it's not a death sentence, but then we have the PrEP. But when she said that, I kind of thought about it. Is the way that we are dealing with HIV/AIDS now, is it like this thing that it is like a homeless thing where it exists and it just exists and we just have to deal with it? Like, how do I don't know if you can answer now, but like, do you have thoughts on that? Do you think she would be happy with the way things are now, or do you think like it actually has become like a homeless problem, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Well, I think knowing Connie of course from her friends' recollections of her and the footage, she would keep saying that we have not done enough. I mean, we don't have a vaccine for HIV/AIDS. It's still, here it's, the price for the medication is still exorbitant. In places like Peru, Latin America, and Africa, there's still countless people who go without medications. Here in LA alone, the incidence of people becoming zero converted among the young, especially Latinos and African Americans, is still really high. I mean, it's not over. Like one of the banners says, it's not over. And she would be on your case about it. She would be through all the politicians that she knew back then as 20-year-olds and 24-year-olds, just hammering to them that it's not enough. The other thing that she would be very, very concerned about is all these trans initiatives, about banning trans kids from doing, sports and penalizing parents and providers from giving kids the option of blocking their puberty. She will have her plate really full. I think she would have, this year, she would have been 69 or 70, between 70 or something, but she will be on your case. And, one thing I wanted to mention, something that you mentioned before about the two-spirit, and, I'm not of course, a gender history scholar or trans history scholar, but the books that she sought out and were given to her by Harry Hay were about Eastern philosophies and Native American history. So that's how she understood her own nature, because she kept questioning herself: is this Western ideology of heteronormativity enough for me? And I think I've been to in-person, previews of this film where they had children. I mean, not children, but I mean young adults coming to and thanking me for, like you said, mentioning that, trans, gender non-conforming, mahus, berdage, all of that has been in history for centuries. And now they have something to show their parents, because like you said, parents feel it's a fad, it's something that millennials thought about it, and this film literally shows that it has been going on for many, many centuries before, and the people who were berdaches and mahus were revered. They were the shamans of their culture. And look what's happened now. I mean, now answering another part of what you were saying, look at that footage of Sylvia Rivera when she was in at that Pride in New York, when she was shut down, which is very famous, the black and white footage. That's how the trans community has felt, since then. That left a big mark, because they were there at the beginning and they were then just taken off the stage, and that left a sting. That left them, weary of the G and the L and the B. And it's only lately that they come into their own, but they have always been there, and they have always been at the vanguard of any movement, of any situation. So my way of showing their excellence and ratifying that is the work that I do.
The and speaking of the work that you do, going to more like a technical aspect with the documentary, the you had a good amount, I'm guessing, of footage. Like with documentaries, there's a lot of editing. Like, can you tell me, like, actually from when you started collecting the footage and the interviews and putting it all together, like, what was the actual process for you to do it? Like, did you have hours upon hours and then you had to whittle it all down? You were, editing this for 6 months, a year, 2 months. Like, what was the actual process of putting the actual film together?
Well, my timeline for most of my films is usually 3 years, and because of COVID, of course, we had to add another year for Ace Diva. My first year was basically finding out all that footage and digitizing. I think we digitized almost like about 30 to 40 hours of VHS, High 8, Super 8, which was generously given by her friends like Peter Cashman and Mickey Caruso and others. So we had a lot of footage to look through. But the main thing was to preserve it. I mean, some of the VHS tapes I was given, I couldn't use them. There was moisture in them. They had a lot of lines in them. So it couldn't even be digitized anymore, which is unfortunate. So if you have any VHS, beyond the early 90s, please try digitize it, because you don't know what kind of history you'll be missing out. Then I found that we needed to focus on what we had the most footage on, which is about her activism and her years between 87 and when she passed. And so we just started gathering who were her closest friends. And because everybody knew Connie in LA, everybody has a story about Connie being in a march, being arrested with her, seeing her kindness, seeing her fearlessness. And I just basically went to the core. And the other people who were like not experts, but peers more than friends, like Tori Osborne and John Duran and Doug Sadownik, is because they came in contact with Connie in the context of doing a demonstration or doing a demo, or just seeing her as a leader. So we were very intentional of what we wanted to show her growth as an activist and leader, and that's why we kept a minimum of talking heads. But the ones we did interview were like really close to Connie: Mary Lucy, Michael Weinstein, Peter Cashman, Paul Langlotz. They were like Robin Podolsky. They were really close to her and have known her throughout, when she started at USC, just being another volunteer, and her becoming a spokesperson, and the media personality that she became. And she became involved with everybody who was anybody in LA at the time, meaning Harry Hay, Maurice Kite. Nationally, she met Larry Kramer. And so, so it took, first of all, was the footage 1 year, the interviews the second year, and then we were going to take a whole year to edit. We had some, difficulties with personal things with the editor. So we kind of postponed the editing, and then COVID hit. So the final edit has been done actually through the pandemic, never meeting with either my colorist or my audio engineer or my editor or my co-producer. It's been a true challenge just to navigate through Zoom and through, just to make it happen. But I felt after I saw George Floyd marches last year, I thought I have to finish this film, now, sooner than later. And but it was a learning curve to try to work all those things digitally, especially when you're making fine-tuned decisions about where the music is going, where the frame is going. It's been really a miracle, to tell you the truth. I'm sure other filmmakers can support that as well.
Well, I'm very glad you persevered and you got it done. Just because, like when I was watching this film, I'm like, wow, I personally been very impacted by getting to know who this person was, who Connie Norman was, and it affected me in a very positive way. And I'm hoping, and I'm pretty sure our audience is going to have a very similar takeaway. Dante, we're here at the end of the Q&A. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we say our thank yous and play the trailer?
Yes. Well, I want to thank you, Victor and Joe, for reaching out and bringing me, at least bringing the film to Miami. Hopefully in the next edition that you'll bring me, because I need to go back to Miami. The thing I'm going to say, the biggest takeaway from this film for everyone should be that Connie's legacy is about the youth. I mean, as you saw in the last interview she had with Sheila Kuehl, who's our Connie supervisor, she was really intent on having the youth have a better life than she did, and in a ways we have failed her, and so it's up to us to make sure that those initiatives and the youth that we come across who are trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary, intersex, feel safe, feel loved, feel seen. And I mean, that would make the whole film and the passing on the torch that was very important to Connie as well, as she passed on the torch of her leadership to Valerie Spencer, and Valerie's passing on to the younger generation, that we know by all of us, not only the T, but all of us, that they're loved and they're precious and they're visible, and that we'll do everything in our power to make sure that they thrive and become the wonderful kids and community members that they should be. And that would make Connie Norman very, very happy and very proud, and also me.
Well, thank you very much, Dante. Thank you for sharing our film with us, and thank you for being part of the Q&A and taking your time from the day to do this. And then now for our audience, we're going to play the trailer for the film in case you happen to be seeing the Q&A before you watch the film. And here is the trailer.
Connie used every possible tool to amplify her messages. I mean, I imagine she would have 1 million Twitter followers today.
I'm going to be talking about it with the rich heritage and the culture of the gay and lesbian community.
She was very caring. She was extremely funny.
Why is it that heterosexuals have lives and gay and lesbian people have lifestyle?
Right
I
on.
think it's queer lives, honey.
And she was very angry.
That was the night when we had experienced the most extreme betrayal by the governor of this state, and under those circumstances, I can understand.
The quality that she had that was so distinctive and that got to people was her honesty. Just blatant honesty.
We have sensationalized the issues of AIDS because it's connected to our sexuality as human beings. And we've done a lot of finger pointing. I want to take some of the finger pointing away.
Connie had to learn the language of government, the language of bureaucracy, the language of regulation, the language of lawyers and doctors and healthcare workers in order to communicate with them as somebody living with HIV and AIDS.
Connie was just relentless in fighting for future generations.
To my congressman, I would say you vote wrong, and you won't win again if you don't start showing some leadership.
There is a link through time between social movements for progressive change.
She would get a hoot out of who we are today. We are now kick-ass bitches because of Connie.
I know it's a big crowd, but I need all the drag queens, all the butch dyke, all the leather dudes and leather dudettes that can get up here to get up here. Listen up, Pete. I am a transsexual with HIV disease. I'm an ex-drag queen, ex-drug addict. I did it, I got it, and I'm dealing with it.